So first of all, thank you all for having me. It's really an honor to be, oh, wow, there's me up there. You all look so lovely from this side, so I hope I don't disappoint. But I really, really do love being in community, and thank Rabbi Marissa for inviting me. So, when I was in college, I fell in love with Indigo Girls. Yeah. I was young and queer, and in my old car, ate up the cassette tape. On my repeated 3.5-hour drive through the country roads from Kirksville, Missouri to the suburbs of St. Louis, as I listened to their debut album and belted out the songs. On a recent visit with my dad, we joked about how on one of those trips, I pulled over and called him because I saw my muffler going down the side of the road with me. He told me to go back and get it, and reminded me that I had my music up too loud, which is why I did not hear the muffler fall off. I would bet anything that I was listening to their album. A year or so later, I discovered that the Indigo Girls released an independent album a few years earlier, before their debut album. I bought it and became uber focused on the title track, Strange Fire. Yeah, see, you know where I'm going, right? Okay. In this week's Torah portion, Shemini, Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, bring Eish Zorah, a strange fire before God. The Torah says, and fire came forth from God and consumed them, thus they died. There was a warning, no explanation, just action and consequences. And then the Torah says, Vayidom Aaron. Aaron was silent. I want to sit with those two things, fire and silence. Eish Zorah. The rabbis debate what went wrong. Was the fire unauthorized? Was it arrogance? A failure to follow instructions? And today I want to bring a different question. What if this is what happens when something harmful enters sacred space and we treat it as if it belongs? We are living in a time of strange fire. Strange fire is most dangerous when it is no longer seen as strange, when it begins to sound like common sense. White supremacy in America is not new, it's foundational, but its ideology has shifted, and that shift matters. Before the Civil Rights Movement, white supremacy was about dominance, maintaining power, enforcing hierarchy. It was vicious and it was confident. Starting in the 1970s, something changed. White supremacists began to understand they were losing, and losing to them felt like dying. Their ideology shifted from dominance to survival, from we are on top to we are on the verge of extinction. David Lane, a white supremacist terrorist, captured this shift with the words, "We must secure the existence of our people and the future for white children." This is what white supremacists refer to as the 14 words. That language is no longer the language of power. It's the language of a cornered rat. And that's what makes it more dangerous. Because a movement that believes it is fighting for survival will justify anything: violence, terror, war. Pittsburgh, Charlottesville, Poway, El Paso, West Bloomfield, to name a few. This is the fire we are living inside of, not confidence not confident white supremacy, but extinction-fearing rage. But something shifted again in 2025 and 26. The cornered rat is no longer cornered, it is in the house. The people who stormed the Capitol waving Confederate flags pardoned. The agencies that protected civil rights dismantled. The agencies, the invasion and replacement are now executive orders signed by this administration. The history of slavery ordered removed from museums. White supremacy is no longer a wounded movement, desperate for survival. It's governing. Which means the strange fire is no longer outside our doors. Anti-Semitism is not separate from this. White supremacy has always needed a story about who is responsible. And in that story, Jews are cast as the hidden force behind everything: immigration, demographic change, the erosion of white power. Jews will not replace us is not new. It is the story shouted out loud. We are told we are powerful and dangerous while being targeted and attacked. That contradiction is not accidental. It's how anti-Semitism functions. When white supremacy was cornered, it needed anti-Semitism to explain its losses. Mass deportation needed an enemy powerful enough to have caused the invasion. The dismantling of civil rights protections needs a shadowy force that made those protections necessary in the first place. The consolidation of power needs a threat large enough to justify emergency measures. And Jews have always served that function. The more power a white supremacist movement holds, the more it needs the conspiracy to be real. Because the conspiracy is what makes the power seem defensive rather than aggressive. That is why anti-Semitism doesn't disappear when white supremacy escalates. Excuse me. That is why anti-Semitism doesn't disappear when white supremacy wins, it escalates. The stronger the movement gets, the bigger the threat needs to be. We are not collateral damage. We are the point. But there is a second fire, less visible, less dramatic, and in some ways more insidious. Because white supremacy doesn't only show up in violence, it shows up in how we run our institutions. Tim Kuhn calls this white supremacy culture. The norms we absorb without noticing. Urgency, the meeting that can't slow down for the person who needs more time. Perfection, the harsh inner critic mistaken for high standards. Either or thinking, the inability to hold two true things at once. Fear of open conflict when raising a hard issue gets treated as the problem. The right to comfort where those with power decide which truths are too much. This is the culture of our organizations, including Jewish organizations. Strange fire doesn't only come from outside, it seeps in. It settles in our meetings, in our decisions, our silences, and if we're not paying attention, we treat it as holy. Which brings me back to Aaron, Vayadom Aharon. Aaron was silent. When is silence sacred and when is it dangerous? There are moments when silence holds grief, but there are also a silence shaped by fear. Fear of conflict, of discomfort, of naming what's true. And in this moment, when white supremacy is not a fringe movement, but a governing one, when anti-Semitism is rising, when these systems have settled into our own institutions, silence is not neutral. Silence is a position. Our tradition does not permit us to stay here. We all, or most of us, know, tzedek, tzedek, tirdov, justice, justice, you shall pursue. Not eventually, but now. But not all fire is strange. Fire can illuminate. It can warm. It can gather people in the dark. The problem in Shemini is not that there is fire, it is that it's the wrong kind. So the question is not how to extinguish everything. The question is, what kind of fire are we tending? A fire of urgency, perfection, comfort, or a fire of patience, accountability, and honest reckoning? A fire that justifies harm in the name of survival, or a fire rooted in truth that no people can flourish, or a fire rooted in truth that no people's flourishing requires diminishing of another? We are all tending something. Through what we say, through what we do, through the cultures we build or allow. White supremacy doesn't need our intention, it needs our habits. That is a strange fire we most need to name. Not only the rage in the streets, but the quiet fire inside our own institutions, the one we must choose every day to replace. So I'll close with this. May we have the courage to reject strange fire, including the fire we didn't know we were carrying. May we have the honesty to look at our sacred spaces and ask what we have allowed in, and may we have the strength to tend something different, which is a fire rooted in dignity, in truth, in knowledge that every person is created in the image of the divine, not because it's comfortable, but because we are commanded. Shabbat shalom.